Why I am opposed to the war in Iran? First of all, I am opposed to remote-controlled wars. I was in favor actually of the invasion of Iraq in 2003 because it was about removing Saddam Hussein from power and liberating the Iraqi people. Saddam Hussein maybe was naive, but Saddam Hussein had killed hundreds of thousands of Kurds, had killed thousands of dissidents, and had invaded two countries, one Iran, 1980, and then Kuwait in 1991. Back then, I was shocked that that Bush, the president, didn't ask the American people to pay a tax for this war. If people agree that the war is just and necessary, they are certainly willing to pay a tax. If they're not willing to pay a tax, it means they don't think it is just or necessary. So back then I was already surprised that the president would start a war and the people would not have to pay for it. War is too easy if you don't have to pay taxes for it. Under Obama, things got worse. He started assassinating terrorists in Afghanistan using drones. We still don't know exactly who was killed. This has now become a general US policy. The USA strikes from the air. No soldiers, no soldiers are deployed, and so the taxes to pay is zero, and you don't even risk the lives of the soldiers. It sounds like a fantastic deal. In fact, the taxpayers do pay, but they pay for the drones and the airplanes for the defense industry. And so actually the Washington lobbyists are happy. It's good for the economy. So indirectly, the drone-based war is a great invention. No US soldiers have to risk their lives, and all those drones and bombers even contribute to the economy. But here's what happens. War becomes too easy. If citizens don't need to pay taxes immediately and soldiers don't need to risk their life, war becomes just a video game where somebody in Washington presses a few buttons and minutes later places and people are blown up thousands of kilometers away. So that's war becomes too easy, and this war in Iran is a good example. And by the way, whenever you don't have soldiers on the ground, you amplify the chances of killing innocents. You end up bombing a school and killing 175 school children, like the United States did at the very beginning of this campaign. And who knows how many more mistakes have already been made. Same in the Caribbean Sea, where the United States have been bombing boats, and we don't know if we are killing fishermen or what. Second reason to be opposed is that there was no debate. Previous wars started after there had been lengthy debates inside the United States, with marches in the street of those opposing them. The president and his political allies, in this case, the people who started the war explained to the US public why the US was going to war only after they started the war. Of course, there's a reason. US public is very reluctant to go to war. US public approved to enter World War II only after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Anyway, this is the first time that a president goes to war without even having a discussion domestically. So obviously the Trump warmongers who started this war, obviously they were afraid of what the US public would say. I think they already knew that the US public would be opposed. In fact, to this day, the reasons and the goals are still vague and sometimes contradictory. Anyway, in just 1 year, Trump, I call him Rambling Donald, has bombed Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Venezuela, Nigeria, and in the Caribbean Sea, these boats are supposed to be narco trafficking boats. And it has supported Israel's genocide in Palestine. This is the man who complains that he didn't get a Nobel Peace Prize. In all of these cases, there was no debate about the merit of killing people in those states, faraway states, which may result in creating future terrorists and and spending taxpayers' money and so on. Another argument to be opposed to this war, of course, we are all getting fed up with the power of Israel over the United States. Even the right-wing fanatics, the traditionally obsessed with defending Israel, are getting tired of this repetitive pattern. You know, the U.S. Does what Israel orders. It's the U.S. that is the banana republic, and the taxpayers' money of U.S. citizens is used to defend, to support Israel's interest in the region. And let's not underestimate also the Arab lobby. Probably Saudi Arabia is also fed up with Iran. So anyway, I mean, Israel and Saudi Arabia want to demilitarize Iran, and the U.S. taxpayers are paying to fight Iran and depose its regime. The money of the U.S. taxpayers is being used not to fix roads or hospitals at home. It's used to achieve the goals of these two countries in the Middle East. Whether you think goals are right or wrong, there are many other countries in the world that could benefit from U.S. help to achieve their goals. Even the right wing understands that Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has been playing games with the United States for years, and the last person the U.S. should trust is Netanyahu. He started saying that Iran was about to get a nuclear weapon, I believe, 33 years ago. And he kept warning that Iran is months or weeks or days away from having a nuclear bomb. He kept crying, bomb, bomb. Iran still doesn't have a nuclear bomb, and in fact, I'm beginning to wonder why. Why not? Because it's kind of a mystery that they never developed a nuclear bomb. If they had the uranium and they had the equipment, and they had the scientists, because the nuclear program was started under the Shah, even before the Islamic Revolution. North Korea acquired a nuclear bomb. Now it has, 100? Despite having lower scientific and engineering capabilities. But anyway, Netanyahu was lying all the time. And now we assume he's telling the truth. We can argue forever whether Israel has legitimate reasons for attacking Iran. I personally strongly suspect that Netanyahu is more responsible than Iran of the October 2023 attacks by Hamas that killed almost 1,000 Israeli civilians. See my you can read my article, Netanyahu's War. But there is, but anyway, that's between Israel and Iran. There is no evidence of any U.S. citizen killed by Iran or by Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, in the last 10-15 years, until Rambling Donald started attacking Iran. So, anyway. Okay, next. The United States bombed Iran in June 2025, last summer, and Rambling Donald repeatedly told the press that Iran's nuclear program had been annihilated, obliterated, destroyed. He used all those words. And now he tells us that Iran is again weeks away from making a nuclear bomb. Either he lied back then or he's lying now. Either way, it's a strong reason not to trust anything he says about Iran. And I'll tell later some of the reasons why he may be lying. This is also becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you were Iran, what would you be doing now with the uranium you have? You would probably think that it was a big mistake not to develop a nuclear bomb. Look how safe North Korea is. And you would be rushing to develop whatever you can with the uranium you have. So United States, by starting this war, the United States is gambling with the lives of tens of millions of people who live in the region. Then I already said that I don't like bombs from the air. They kill wars that consist in bombing from the air. You kill a lot of innocents, and the relatives, friends, neighbors of those victims are strongly motivated to become the terrorists of tomorrow. That's a simple reason why war should always be the last resort. Especially a war against Israel, which has shown, a country that has shown no respect for civilian lives in Gaza. Killing civilians does not contribute to the long-term security of the United States. Next, when you assassinate the leader of a country, you can assume that most likely the successor will want to avenge it, if nothing else out of pride. Even worse, if a candidate to the succession is the son. So Iran's new supreme leader is the son of the previous supreme leader. Israel and the United States just assassinated his father, his mother, and probably other member of the family. If your father and mother had just been assassinated, would you be thinking of surrender or of revenge? The USA has been calling Iran a sponsor of terrorism for many years, and from the point of view of Israel, this is absolutely true. Although, as Westerners, as Europeans and Americans, the problem for us has been mostly Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Well, guess what? Iran was the first enemy of the Taliban in Afghanistan, of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS. Iran is Shiite. All these terrorist groups are Sunni. So the Sunnis hated the Shiites even more than they hated us. Again, this could become a self-fulfilling prophecy that Iran now will become a terrorist organization. I mean, obviously they cannot compete with match Israel's and the United States military power. So what can they do? Maybe they will start targeting first the civilian infrastructure of the Gulf states. That's an easy target, but then maybe they will send terrorists to the United States. So that becomes another self-fulfilling prophecy. Iran has never sponsored terrorism in the United States, but now it's probably very tempted to. Next reason to oppose this war. Everybody in the Trump orbit is assuming that the Iranian people are happy to see their leadership assassinated. It might be true that the majority does. The majority hated this regime. Certainly the majority of young urban people hated the supreme leader. But we have learned that even Saddam Hussein had fans. About 10 million people attended Ayatollah Khomeini's funeral in 1989, and that's probably the biggest funeral in history. Times have changed, and the regime does not have the same kind of popular support, but assuming that today all Iranians rejoice at the assassination of Khamenei is optimistic at best. We always underestimate the silent majority. In this case, it is probably not a majority, but it could still be a significant silent group, tens of millions of people. The older people in the cities and the rural population that nobody really knows how religious they are, how much they believed in this regime. Now, a lot of us would be happy to see the Iranian regime disappear, and just to be fair, a lot of us would be happy to see the Netanyahu regime also disappear at the same time. So regime change could be a good reason to support this war, just like I supported the invasion of Iraq, not just the war against Iraq. But the regime change without physically invading the country is wishful thinking. A regime that has existed since 1979 is deeply embedded in the society and heavily armed. If the USA bombs Iran and does not take out the regime, it will just leave behind a country in ruins. Basically, a bigger Gaza. A Gaza with 90 million people. It will, so the United States has a terrible record of regime change. Iran's dictatorship was obviously hated by a lot of its own people. So I can see that this was, in a sense, those demonstrations really reminded you of the color revolutions in the former Soviet republics of the Arab Spring. I can see that it was a unique opportunity to strike Iran, the Iranian regime, when it is most vulnerable. And by the way, Iran's main ally, Russia, is bogged down in Ukraine. So removing the Iranian regime could have a lot of support. The problem is that Rambling Donald has said that to the Iranian people, go ahead and overthrow the regime without giving them any support on the ground. And what he has done in Venezuela is not a good precedent. He has replaced one dictator with another one. The new dictator is friendly. That's the only difference. But for the people of Venezuela, there's still no democratic elections. Not only that, it sounds a little hypocritical coming from a man who is best friend with the dictator of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman al Saud. Iran's theocratic regime is not much worse. It's not any worse than Saudi Arabia's regime. In fact, Jews and Christians are free to worship their gods in Iran, but not in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, you go to jail for a mere display of the Bible. So, Rambling Donald deposes one dictator, but does business with the other one. It's easy to suspect that it all depends on how much money he makes, not how much he cares for democracy and freedom. And also, there is no doubt that Israel is a democracy, but following Israel's genocide of Palestinians in Gaza, the whole world, not just me, thinks that Iran's regime is not much worse than Israel's. So the case for liberating the Iranian people is weak, unfortunately. How about liberating the Palestinians first and the Saudi people next? So next reason to oppose the war, there's no plan for what happens if the Iranian regime actually falls, which might well be the case. If the United States stops bombing for a few days, we'll see. Maybe the Iranian people will come out and succeed. But what next? We know what happened after Saddam Hussein's regime fell in Iraq. Years of civil war, complete destruction of the country, and the rise of the Islamic State. In fact, we know what happened in Iran after the revolution of 1979. There was a revolution against a dictator, and there was hope that the democratic forces would win. Instead, Ayatollah Khomeini came out of that revolution as the new leader. So we know what happened when the Soviet Union disintegrated. There was no civil war, but there was economic collapse, and out of that, what we got? Putin. So so what is the plan if Iran's regime falls? What kind of help is the United States going to provide to Iran? Number one, to rebuild. We destroyed a lot. And number two, to support whatever new regime is in power. And how long will the United States provide that help? Because the United States specializes in running away. So whoever comes next, he or she will inherit Iran in ruin, destroyed by thousands of Israeli and US bombs. Would the United States pay compensation for all the damage that this bomb have caused to the Iranian economy, or we just abandon the Iranian people with their ruins, like we are doing in Gaza? Next reason to oppose the war: there are other horrible regimes. Saudi Arabia, North Korea. Saudi Arabia has the world record of execution. Saudi Arabia, not Iran, funded Al-Qaeda and ISIS that attacked Western countries. Saudi Arabia has thousands of dissidents in jail or secretly murdered. Saudi Arabia, not Iran, murdered a Washington Post journalist. North Korea actually does possess nuclear weapons, does possess missiles capable of reaching US territory, and that's a real threat to the United States. And then there are brutal regimes in Myanmar, Libya, Sudan. So why Iran? Of course, we all know why Iran, because of the oil. Next reason to oppose is the biggest impact of the war is on the neighbors of Iran and on the Europeans. Neither were consulted before starting the war. Only Israel was consulted. And by the way, it is time to stop fighting wars over oil. It is time to get rid of our dependence on oil. If our economy and our corporations didn't depend on oil, all these wars in the Middle East wouldn't exist or would be much smaller. If nothing else, because all of these dictators and theocracies would not be so rich. When we fight a war for oil, we make yet another investment in the oil economy, which means that oil producers become even more important, and that almost guarantees that there will be even more wars in the future. Next, the United States did not protect the allies in the region. I mean, this is so visible now. The Gulf states, after a few days from the beginning of the war, the Gulf states are dangerously low on missile interceptors. Their economy is in shambles. Their image of safe places is destroyed for who knows how many years. Now, one can understand why the United States is reluctant to deploy thousands of missile interceptors paid with US taxpayers' money. But this is a lose-lose situation. Either you spend the money to protect your allies, or you're abandoning your allies to the enemy, in this case to Iran. Now, it was different in 2003 when the United States attacked Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Saddam Hussein didn't have drones and today's sophisticated software-controlled missiles. So it was a different world. Saddam could only shoot missiles at Kuwait, and Kuwait had approved the war. So it was a different kind of scenario. In fact, Saddam Hussein did not shoot a single missile against Israel or Saudi Arabia during the 2003 war. Today, Iran has thousands of drones, and we knew that. So the United States left the Gulf state completely unprotected. Now Iran has very little to lose. If it is true, they keep telling us, if it is true, then Israel and the United States have destroyed so much of its war machine. The Gulf states still have a lot to lose. By the way, Iran can start hitting their oil wells, even their desalination plants. I mean, their water doesn't come from rivers or glaciers. It comes from desalination wells. Next, Europe. It will not be lost on the Europeans that the United States did nothing to alleviate the negative consequences of this war on Europe. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's obvious to everybody that Europe depends more on oil from the Middle East. And by the way, United States actions in the Middle East have created lasting instabilities, which have caused huge numbers of refugees sailing towards Europe. So Europe has paid a price for all the oil wars fought by the United States in the Middle East. When Vice President Vance bashed Europe for taking too many immigrants, he forgot to mention that many of those immigrants were refugees from the wars started by the United States in the region. So given the precedents, Europe has reason to be concerned that this could result in another catastrophe. Next, I don't know if they thought it carefully. What if China or Russia decides to enter the war? After all, just a few months ago, Russia and Iran approved a 20-year comprehensive strategic partnership treaty. And they conducted joint naval exercises in the Caspian Sea. China and Iran 4 or 5 years ago signed a 25-year cooperation agreement. And China is Iran's largest trading partner. So it's a huge gamble to assume that Russia and China will watch as distant spectators, like they did when Bush invaded Iraq in 2003. Putin had just become president, and he was busy with his own war in Chechnya against his own Muslim enemies. And China, 2003, China was still at best a mid-sized power. It had very little influence outside. Its economy was 1/10 of the United States economy. Now it's almost the same. Next reason to oppose the war, the way it's going, the United States has placed the Iranian regime into a corner. Iran cannot make a deal after the United States cheated on so many previous deals. Iran had a deal with Obama, and the rambling Donald cancelled it. Iran just weeks ago was negotiating with Trump's emissaries, and the rambling Donald bombed it in the middle of the negotiations. So clearly the Trump people were not negotiating in good faith. If you're Iranian, do you trust anything the United States offers you, any deal? Which guarantees can the United States give to Iran that this bombing will not repeat? I don't think Iran will take any piece of paper as credible. Trump's signature is worth nothing. It's worth nothing here in the United States. Imagine in Tehran. So it is very difficult for Iran to surrender. We put Iran in the situation where, surrendering is suicide. It's better for the regime to continue the war until extinction. I don't know. I don't know how rambling Donald gets out of this situation. Now there seems to be an assumption in Washington that Iran would be happy to end the war as soon as possible. That Iran is desperate to sue for peace. I think the United States will get desperate to end the war before Iran gets desperate to end the war. Nobody in the United States, not even the right-wing fanatics, want a prolonged war. And Iran knows that, of course. So what is Iran's motivation to surrender, knowing that nobody in the United States wants a prolonged war? Now, rambling Donald has said that he decides when the war ends. But think of it. It is actually Iran that will decide when the war ends. Iran can continue threatening the oil routes until Rambling Donald finally surrenders and accepts Iran's terms. Some kind of guarantee there will be no more bombings. It's really hard to see what kind of guarantee Iran will accept. So taken all together, these points should make everybody very uneasy about the ignorance, the incompetence, and the corruption of the Trump administration, and of the clueless commentators on the right-wing news channels who defend this operation. During the Bush presidency in 2003, I often questioned the competence of Bush advisors like Condoleezza Rice, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, but they look like intellectual giants compared with Rambling Donald and his current advisors. Like most of Rambling Donald's decisions, this Iran war was based on incompetence, ignorance, arrogance, and plain stupidity. A deadly cocktail of subhuman qualities. Incidentally, the stench of corruption is unbearable. The people in charge of negotiating with Iran and of drafting the US strategy in the Middle East include Jared Kushner, a member of the Trump crime family, who is trying to raise, I don't know, many billions from foreign governments for his private equity firm, while at the same time is working as the official Middle East envoy of the United States. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, or better, the tip of the swamp. Okay, the last 2-3 major reasons to oppose the war. This war is yet another distraction from the Epstein files. Only the most gullible Republican can ignore the fact that Rambling Donald has come up with one distraction after the other to stop the media from talking about the Epstein files. And finally, somehow Trump's actions always benefit Russia. Call me paranoid. The price of oil spiked, which increases Russia's oil revenues right at the time when the Russian economy was beginning to suffer from the war in Ukraine. Furthermore, this new war distracts the world from the atrocity committed by Russia in Ukraine daily. And this new war gives Trump a new excuse not to send weapons to Ukraine, because the United States need them in Iran. Trump even rolled back some of the oil sanctions against Russia. I think all of the oil sanctions against Russia. Something that very few people notice because of all the noises surrounding the war. So Trump's war in Iran is a win-win for Putin.